were seen as a pretty bad thing. Attitudes towards professionals in antebellum U.S., there was a lot of mistrust. Because for doctors, for instance, as a professional, their two major ways of treating you were to purge you or bleed you. That's what they knew medicine-wise, okay? Economy of the South. Because suddenly now Alabama, Mississippi, northern Louisiana, parts of Georgia are deemed really great places to grow cotton. The cotton gin makes it economically viable to grow cotton and then pick it and then have somebody separate it, i.e. the machine, okay? So there's this great demand for slaves. And by 1800, Southerners are already talking about King Cotton and the importance of cotton in not only in their economy, but the economy of the country. Around 1800 is when Eli Whitney introduces the idea of interchangeable parts to the United States. He takes a bunch of guns to the Army Department, disassembles them, mixes all the parts up, and reassembles 10 rifles, or how many ever he started out with. And it catches on militarily with rifles and guns, but it really catches on in terms of factories. And that's part of the Lowell system in Utopian, too, is that you have a loom, you know, the machine that makes the cloth. And instead of having to replace the entire loom if you break one little thing, now you just replace the broken part, okay? So it becomes part of what's called the American system of manufacturing also. And forever changes the economy of the North, making industrialization that much more potent in the North, and then cotton that much more potent in the South. So he kind of is the person most responsible for the conflicts that lead up to the Civil War, if you really want to think about it. Any questions on him? Okay, who invented what in terms of antebellum technology? These are things that came out before the Civil War. The reaper, Cyrus McCormick, okay? This was used for cutting grain, a machine that cut grain. The sewing machine, Elias Howe, improved on by Isaac Singer, okay? Why was the sewing machine so important? Well, first of all, it allowed me, the woman, to not spend hours hand sewing everybody's clothing in my family. I could very quickly run a seam up with a machine rather than sitting there meticulously sewing it by hand. It also, by 1860, allows for the mass production of clothing in factories. Okay, and they get that down really well with putting out uniforms during the Civil War, and then by the end of the Civil War, they're changing back to making men's shirts and pants and women's dresses called shirtwaists, that kind of thing. Steel tip plow, John Deere. Really important, you needed a steel tip plow to be able to plow up the Great Plains like Nebraska, the Dakotas, Kansas, okay? The telegraph, Morse. And the telegraph was really important in terms of railroad development, so they knew where railroads were, how long it was going to be until the next train came, and they were important for getting information to various parts. Suddenly, something happened in Charleston, South Carolina, could be sent by telegraph to New York and almost instantaneously received. Before, it took maybe months for a mail ship to go. The revolver, Colt, okay. The steamboat, Robert Fulton, about 1807-ish, I'd have to look up the exact date, he invents sails the Clermont up the Hudson River. Okay, so one year they had a question and they had choice A. So the question was something about which of the following is not the correct inventor and invention. And so it was like Samuel Colt, the revolver, Robert Fulton, the steam engine, Allen Rifle, the rifle, Elias Howe, the sewing machine, and obviously Allen Rifle was not the person who invented the rifle. What a stupid question there. It should have been a giveaway for everyone. The tariff of 1816 is one of the first tariffs that starts to make Southerners a little bit unconcerned about tariffs, okay? It is not the tariff of abominations. It's a precursor to that. But it does have a protective tariff part to it. Okay, we're going to charge a higher tariff on British textiles in order to encourage American companies to produce textiles. Remember that by 1840, Southerners are really complaining that they are paying what they call the 40 bale theory. 40 bales of every 100 bales of cotton they produce is going to pay taxes, both at state and national levels for imports as well as property taxes, that kind of thing. The Panic of 1819, the first of 5 panics in the 19th century. 1819, 1837, 1853, 1870 something, 1890 something, okay? Each one of these panics is caused by speculation or over-speculation. And in the case of the Panic of 1819, it's over-speculation on land. People are buying land on credit, and then, or with bank notes. And then the government or the bank wants their money back, and they say, Matthew, you need to pay off your loan, and Matthew says, okay, last name, I don't have the money. And the bank ends up going under, and what happened to Malia's money in her savings account? She lost it. So sad. Nothing she can do because there's no FDIC. Okay? The same thing occurs like in 1837, so there's this vicious cycle. Does the government impose banking regulations? No. They do really nothing. Some people, like Andrew Jackson, blame the Panic of 1819 on the National Bank. And that will be partially his justification for killing the bank. Architecture of the second bank reflects what? It was a picture of the second bank. These are pillars. Okay? So just imagine a traditional Greek temple, and that's what the second bank looked like. So it reflects what? Republican values, because democracy, republicanism, okay? Think Greek and Roman buildings. The Rush-Bagot Treaty did what? Demilitarized the Great Lakes. It was made after the War of 1812. In 1819, and the United States and Great Britain agreed to keep warships off of the Great Lakes. So all the ships that would be on the Great Lakes were for business purposes only. The Indian Removal Act, 1830. How is it justified? Why and the purpose of? So let's talk about why and the purpose of first of all. It was to encourage white settlement in the South, especially Georgia and Alabama. The purpose was to move the Indians, the 5 civilized tribes, off that land, like the Creek, the Cherokee, the Choctaw Indians, etc. Seminoles out of Florida. It was justified in the sense that whites believed that Native Americans were not using the land properly, that only whites knew how to set up proper farms. Okay? If we took Mr. Cherokee Farmer in 1830 and Mr. White Farmer in 1830, the biggest difference between them would be that Mr. Indian Farmer was a polytheistic person and Mr. White Farmer was Christian. Okay? They both held slaves. Cherokees were into slavery too, including blacks. They both built log cabins. They both had school systems. They both had writing systems. Cherokee men and women dressed much like, they weren't running around in loincloths, okay? They dressed more like Western people or European people. Why did Jackson want the Indians to leave? Because he wanted whites to farm the land. Jackson and the Cherokee court decisions. The first court decision is Cherokee Nation versus Georgia, where the Cherokees maintained that they were an independent nation within a nation. And that's, the whites were not entitled to their land. The court said no, they were dependent domestic nations. But no, they only had the right to their land, but they were not an independent nation. The second case looks like Worcester, but it's pronounced Wooster versus Georgia. In Wooster versus Georgia, the court reconfirmed that the state of Georgia had no claim that Indians were underneath the protection of the federal government. Okay? Which is why when you're on an Indian reservation like the one in Moapa, you're under really federal law, the tribal law and federal law. You're not under state of Nevada law whatsoever.